A newlywed couple moved into their new house, then got a letter from the watcher, but they never expected the watcher to be who it turned out to be. Before we dive into today's story, please write in the comment where you are watching from, and what time you are watching, as I would like to know how far this story travels. The first time Mark saw the house at 12 Maple Lane, he knew. Not the kind of knowing people talk about when they're rational and ready, the kind that grabs your gut and whispers, "This is it." Maybe it was the morning light catching the wraparound porch. Maybe it was the creak of the old oak tree in the front yard. Or maybe it was the price, 40 grand under market in a town where people didn't move out so much as die in their home. Either way, it was perfect. Rachel wasn't convinced at first. "It's too quiet," she said, her voice barely louder than the wind that morning. Like funeral quiet. But Linda Everett, their realtor, had a way of silencing doubt. She was nearing 60, sharp as a tack, always dressed like she had just come from church, even on weekdays. "Quiet is good," Linda said as she led them inside. "You've had your fill of sirens and traffic. Willow Creek is a place to breathe." And it was. The place had a charm you couldn't fake. Original crown molding, a carved banister, kitchen cabinets painted in a robin's egg blue that Rachel loved immediately. There were no neighbors on either side, just a few distant houses visible through the maple trees. They toured the rooms in near silence, as if afraid to disturb something. They signed the papers 2 weeks later. By their third day, the house was filled with boxes, open suitcases, and the thrum of new routines. Mark set up his home office in the sunroom overlooking the backyard. Rachel rearranged their books and hung pictures, carefully measuring the placement like the walls could judge her. Every room felt like it had secrets, and she was determined to make it theirs. That first night, they toasted with wine on the back porch. Fireflies blinked over the grass like a light show just for them. Mark leaned back, his arm around her. "This was the right move," he said. Rachel nodded, watching the tree line. "It still feels unreal, like someone else's house." "It's ours now." The second night was colder. The wind picked up around 3 a.m., rattling the windows just enough to pull Rachel from sleep. She lay still, staring at the ceiling. The house moaned faintly, the way old houses do, like it was settling into itself again after so many quiet years. She heard something else too, not loud, just deliberate. A soft tap. Then another. Not from the door, not from upstairs, from the mailbox. She waited, heart thudding, counting breaths. Mark was asleep beside her, his breathing slow and even. The noise didn't come again. By morning it was easy to dismiss. Squirrels, maybe, or a loose shutter. Until the third day. It was nearly noon when Rachel found the envelope. She'd gone to the front yard to water the 2 dying rose bushes the previous owner had left behind. The mailbox squeaked when she opened it. Inside, resting on the bare metal, was a single, cream-colored envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just their names written in dark ink, almost too neatly, Mark and Rachel Whitmore. She called Mark, who was inside on a call. He joined her in the foyer, pulling open the envelope with a flick of his thumb. One sheet of paper. Typed. No signature. "Welcome to 12 Maple Lane. I've been watching you. I watched the last ones too." Rachel stared at the words. "This isn't funny." Mark exhaled a dry laugh. "No kidding. It's a prank. Maybe one of the neighbors having fun with the newcomers." Rachel turned the envelope in her hands. "No stamp. Someone walked this here. Or it was stuck in the back of the mailbox from before." "Then why our names?" Mark didn't answer right away. He looked out through the front window, down the quiet road lined with maples swaying in the breeze. There was no one. Just the wind and the faint hiss of leaves rubbing together. "Let's not make it a thing," he said finally. "If it happens again, I'll talk to Linda. Maybe she knows if anyone around here likes pulling this kind of crap." Rachel folded the note and placed it on the kitchen counter. She didn't want to throw it away just yet. That night, they bolted the doors and left the porch light on. By the fourth day, Mark had dismissed the letter entirely. He whistled while unpacking his office gear and argued with Comcast over the spotty internet. Rachel, meanwhile, kept glancing out the window. She'd taken to writing things down in a little leather notebook she kept in her hoodie pocket. Times, sounds, any odd thing. She didn't tell Mark. She didn't want to feed into his eye rolls. At 5:37 p.m., just before sunset, Rachel saw the curtain shift in the empty house across the street. It was quick, barely a movement, but it was there. The place had been for sale too, though not as long as theirs had. According to Linda, the owner had passed away and her kids were still sorting out the estate. Rachel stood on the porch a few minutes, pretending to sip coffee. Nothing else moved, just trees and sky and the sleepy hum of the neighborhood winding down. That evening she brought it up. "Someone's in the Carsons' house." Mark looked up from his laptop. "What house?" "The one across the street with the boarded shed." "Babe, there's nobody there. Linda said it's empty." "I know what I saw." Mark lowered his screen, studying her. "You're freaked out, understandably. New place, weird note, the house is older than my grandma, it messes with your head." Rachel sighed and stood. "You don't believe me. I believe you saw something." She left the room. Later that night, Mark came into the bedroom with a fresh beer and a smile. "Hey, I checked online. No one's registered that house since the Carsons. I even did a Google Street View, photos from 2 years ago. It's just sitting there. Empty." Rachel was brushing her hair. She paused mid-stroke. 2 years is a long time to sit empty. Why? "Probably estate drama. You know how families are." But Rachel didn't smile. She turned back to the mirror and stared at herself. That night she dreamt of footsteps on hardwood. Loud ones, measured, like boots. She woke up around 3:12 a.m. The wind had stopped. The quiet was too quiet. She got up and went to the front window. The street was still, but the mailbox was open. The black lid dangled forward like a mouth caught mid-sentence. She went downstairs alone, barefoot on cold floors, her heartbeat drumming in her ears. The mailbox was empty, but sitting on the porch rail was a single cream-colored envelope. The second letter came 4 days later. It was waiting on the windowsill above the kitchen sink, nestled between a half-dead basil plant and the ceramic salt shaker shaped like a fox. Neither Mark nor Rachel had put it there, that much they knew. Rachel spotted it first. Same creamy envelope, same neat handwriting. "The kitchen gets the best light in the morning. You're beautiful when you're distracted." Rachel dropped it like it had burned her. Mark didn't try to joke this time. He held the letter at arm's length like a ticking device, eyes scanning it twice, then a third time. "Okay, not a prank." "No kidding," Rachel snapped. Mark called Linda, the realtor, that afternoon. She sounded surprised, concerned even, but not shocked. "The house has a long history," she said. "But it's just stories. Kids in town make things up, you know how it is." "No, I don't," Mark said. "Is this something we should know before it gets worse?" Linda's voice dipped, softer now. "You're not in danger, if that's what you mean. But let me make a few calls, see if there's a pattern." That night, they double-checked every lock. Mark installed motion sensor lights along the driveway. Rachel put a chair under the front door handle like she'd seen in movies. Neither slept much. The third letter was folded into Mark's lunch bag, tucked between his sandwich and a protein bar. "You always skip breakfast. You'll burn out working like that. Your wife deserves more time with you." Mark stood in the middle of the kitchen, fists clenched, eyes darting around like the watcher might step out from behind the fridge at any moment. "How?" he muttered. "How the hell did it get in there?" The bag had been on the counter. Neither of them had left it unattended, and the doors were locked. No signs of forced entry. That same day, Rachel found a letter inside her sock drawer. "The lavender ones are my favorite. You wore them Tuesday." She sat on the bed for nearly an hour, just holding it. Then she threw every sock she owned into a trash bag and left it on the porch. She didn't care how irrational it looked. After that, the letters kept coming, always untraceable, always placed in places only they would access, under the couch cushions, inside Mark's briefcase, even once inside Rachel's purse while she was in the shower. One letter stood out from the rest. It was shorter than usual. "The nursery window is lovely. I saw her dancing." Rachel dropped the letter and took 2 steps back before her knees gave out. Mark rushed in and caught her, the paper fluttering to the ground beside them. They stared at each other, both pale, both stunned. "We don't," Rachel started. "I know," Mark said. They didn't have a nursery, just a spare room. A room they hadn't touched since moving in, except to store boxes and a folded treadmill. A room they'd half-joked about one night, wine-drunk and dreaming. Maybe one day, Rachel had said. But no one else knew that. Later that night, Mark climbed the stairs slowly and pushed the spare room door open. The window was unlocked. He stood there for a long time, staring out into the dark. The next day, Mark bought cameras, inside and out, motion-activated, cloud storage, state-of-the-art. They installed them together, carefully, silently, checking angles and lighting. Every entrance was covered, every hallway, even the spare room. Rachel slept slightly better that night, wrapped in Mark's arms. But the sense of being watched didn't fade. 3 mornings later, Rachel woke first. The smell of coffee drifted faintly from the kitchen, though neither of them had brewed any. She padded out of the bedroom, heart drumming. On the kitchen counter, tucked under the edge of a plate, was another envelope. She opened it with trembling fingers. Cameras can't see everything, but I can. You dream about a little girl in this house. So did the last woman. She dropped the letter and rushed to the front door, yanking it open, yelling Mark's name. The cameras had recorded nothing, not a single blip. They called the police that afternoon. Officer Dean Hastings arrived in a dusty cruiser, looking tired before he even stepped onto the porch. He listened to Mark and Rachel explain, nodding slowly. When they showed him the letters, his eyes flicked over them with a strange tightness. When they mentioned the nursery comment, he stiffened. "You're not the first to complain about that house," he said under his breath. Rachel leaned forward. "Wait. What does that mean?" But Hastings only scratched his head and folded the papers back up. "You'll want to keep those. We'll open a file, do a sweep. But these things, they don't always go somewhere." "That's it?" Mark asked. "No fingerprints, no forensics?" "No prints, no sign of entry, no pattern, far as we can tell. No actual crimes committed yet." "Yet?" Rachel snapped. "You just said other people complained." Hastings looked at her for a long second, then lowered his voice. "This isn't the first time someone felt watched in that house. It goes back, maybe longer than you think." He walked away after that, refusing to answer more. The neighbors weren't any better. Rachel tried knocking on doors, just to ask if anyone had seen anything. Most weren't home. The few who were answered with tight smiles and quick excuses. One older man across the street, Mr. Halverson, looked at her through the screen door and said, "Sometimes the quiet houses are that way for a reason," before closing the door without another word. Rachel didn't sleep the night after the police visit. Mark tried, tossing and turning beside her, murmuring in his sleep, twitching at unseen things. But Rachel stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts knotted like barbed wire. By morning, she was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, fingers flying across the keys. She searched real estate records, old news articles, obituaries, anything tied to 12 Maple Lane. Most of it was frustratingly vague, listings with generic photos, owners' names redacted or missing entirely. It didn't make sense. Everything about the house felt scrubbed, sanitized. She found something odd in a 2013 housing forum, an anonymous post titled, "Run from 12 Maple." The thread was dead, no replies, but the post read, "We left at 2:30 in the morning, couldn't stay another night, our daughter wouldn't sleep in the house. Said the lady with the neck kept staring at her, I saw her too. We're done. Don't care if we lose the money." Rachel stared at it, heart thudding. She clicked the user profile. It was empty. When Mark came down, she showed him the post. He glanced at it and shook his head. "Crazy people write crazy things," he said, pouring coffee with a trembling hand. Rachel didn't argue. But she noticed how pale he looked, his eyes bloodshot. He hadn't been sleeping either. Later that afternoon, she visited the Willow Creek County Records Office, a squat building that smelled like mildew and printer toner. She explained to the board clerk at the desk that she was looking into property ownership history. "You live at 12 Maple?" the woman asked, tapping on her keyboard. Rachel hesitated. "Yes." The woman frowned. "We don't get many requests about that place." When Rachel pressed, the clerk pulled up a file, scrolled for a while, then paused. "That's weird." "What is?" "There's a gap, 1996 to 2008. No official records, no sales filed. It's just blank. Rachel leaned forward. How does that happen? The clerk gave a non-committal shrug. Someone with money. Or someone with something to hide. Rachel requested printed records anyway. She spent the next 2 hours combing through them in the public reading room. A few patterns emerged. A couple bought the house in 2009, sold it 9 months later. A single mother and her daughter in 2011, lasted 6 months. A family of 4 in 2014 filed a restraining order against an unknown stalker, then disappeared. Literally disappeared. Their car found in a parking lot 2 states away, no forwarding address. Each new file deepened the pit in her stomach. We're not the first. When she returned home that evening, Mark was asleep on the couch. Not peacefully, he thrashed, muttered, flinched. Rachel knelt beside him and gently shook him. His eyes flew open. "Don't touch me!" She stumbled backwards, startled. Mark blinked, realized what he'd said, and sat up quickly. "I'm sorry, I thought I saw someone." "In your dream?" He looked at her, haunted. "No, in the hallway. At night. I woke up and someone was standing there. I thought it was you at first, but the way they stood, they were too still, just watching me." Rachel's throat went dry. "When?" "Last night. And the night before. Always in the same place, just at the edge of the light." She sat beside him, tension crawling up her spine. "Why didn't you tell me?" Mark exhaled. "Because I thought I was losing it." She almost told him about the knocking, then, the soft, rhythmic tapping she'd started hearing behind the walls. But she couldn't bring herself to add more weight to the already crumbling pile of their shared sanity. That night, neither of them slept upstairs. They unrolled the guest mattress in the living room, watched reruns of old sitcoms on low volume, tried to pretend they were just camping inside their own home. But around 2 a.m., Rachel heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. Not at the window, not on the door. Inside the wall. Behind the bookshelf. Then beneath the floorboards, like something small, intelligent, was feeling its way around the house. He squeezed her eyes shut. "If I don't look, it won't be real." But it was real. It always was. The next morning, Rachel made a decision. She climbed the attic stairs. She hadn't been up there since they moved in. The pull-down ladder groaned under her weight, the steps stiff and slightly warped. Dust floated like ash in the sunlight pouring through the tiny attic window. The space was mostly empty. A few cobwebbed boxes, a rusted tricycle in the corner. She stepped forward cautiously, her shoes crunching grit and dust. Then she saw them. Dolls, 10 or 12, all porcelain, arranged in a perfect circle on the wooden floor. Their dresses faded, their painted eyes cracked and staring outward in different directions. In the center of the circle sat another cream envelope. Rachel's hands shook as she picked it up. They didn't listen either. She backed down the ladder too fast, missed a step and nearly fell. Mark caught her at the bottom, wide-eyed. "What happened?" She handed him the letter. The attic. He didn't ask, he just nodded. That night they sat on opposite sides of the couch, the air between them thick and stale, no longer filled with comfort. "You think we made a mistake?" Mark said quietly. "I think we're in something we don't understand," Rachel replied. Mark rubbed his face. "Maybe it's not the house, maybe it's us. Stress, moving, our past." Rachel stood. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make this our fault, like we invited it." Mark's voice rose. "We did invite it. We bought the damn place. Because we trusted it was safe." His jaw clenched. "Maybe I should have listened when you said it felt off." The silence that followed was colder than anything outside. For the first time, Rachel wondered, would they even make it out of this together? The first time Mark noticed the wrench out of place, he didn't think much of it. He kept his tools in precise order, every socket, screwdriver, and bolt in a labeled drawer or hook. It was the only part of the house he still felt control over. So when the wrench turned up on the floor under the workbench, he frowned, picked it up, and assumed he'd dropped it. The second time, the claw hammer was standing vertically in the corner like someone had placed it deliberately. The third time, he found a pile of nails arranged in a small spiral on top of his toolbox. That's when he stopped pretending. "Did you go in the garage?" he asked Rachel one morning, his voice too sharp for coffee time. She glanced up from the paper. "No, I never go in there. Why?" Mark didn't answer. He just turned and walked away. Rachel had her own concerns. Her phone disappeared for nearly 2 hours on a rainy Tuesday. She had left it on the nightstand while folding laundry upstairs. When she returned, it was gone. She tore the house apart. Mark helped, both of them anxious and arguing by the end of it. Then, without explanation, it reappeared on the kitchen counter exactly where she'd checked before. Rachel unlocked it. All her messages were gone. Every single text thread from years back. Her photos were untouched, her apps still installed, but her messages were completely wiped. She showed Mark in silence. He paled. "I didn't touch it," he said quickly. "I swear, Rachel, I didn't." Later that week, a large manila envelope arrived in their mailbox. No postmark, no return address. Inside were printed pages, dozens of them. Screenshots of Rachel's emails to her mother, personal ones, private frustrations about the house and her fears. Worse still, someone had printed full journal entries, ones she had typed on her laptop, never shared, never even uploaded online. Mark read over her shoulder, both of them frozen in a kind of numb horror. But one line stood out among them. "I feel like I'm being erased, one memory at a time." Rachel backed away from the table like the papers might catch fire. "They're in the house," she whispered. "They've been in the house all along." The next day, Rachel went out for answers again. Mark didn't try to stop her. The town of Willow Creek had turned against them quietly, shoulders stiffening when they entered the diner, smiles tightening at the market. It was subtle at first, but now they could feel it. People didn't want to talk about the house. They didn't want to talk to them. At the corner gas station, a teenage boy was working the register. He had long hair, a nose ring, and the kind of easy suspicion that came from growing up around too many secrets. When Rachel mentioned the house, his expression flickered. "You live at 12 Maple?" She nodded. "My sister used to babysit there," he said, lowering his voice, "years ago. Said she always felt like someone was in the walls, watching her from behind the mirrors. She left town a few months after she quit." Rachel leaned in. "Where did she go?" He shrugged. "Somewhere in New Hampshire, I think. She doesn't like to talk about it." "Can I talk to her?" He hesitated. Then he jotted down her name and the last town she mentioned on the back of a receipt. Rachel spent that night digging through social media and people finder sites until she finally found the woman, a nurse named Delaney Rhodes living in a small New Hampshire town called Millstone. Her Facebook profile was private, but her LinkedIn wasn't. Rachel messaged her directly. The reply came the next morning. "I knew someone else would find me eventually. You need to leave. The house is just a trap. It's always the same. They scare you, then they buy it back for cheap, then someone else moves in." Rachel read it 3 times, her skin crawling with cold realization. It wasn't a haunting. It was a game. She showed the message to Mark over breakfast. He read it, then set the phone down carefully. Do they do this on purpose, intentionally drive people out? Rachel nodded slowly. "It's happened before. You saw the files. Every couple leaves within a year, some after just months." "But why? Who gains from it?" "Someone who wants to control this place. Someone who makes money, maybe the agency or someone in town. And the watcher? Maybe it's not one person at all. Maybe it's a system." Mark leaned back, rubbing his temples. "But why us?" Rachel stared at the window. The wind was blowing hard outside, the maple trees thrashing like they wanted to tell her something. "Because we were easy, we needed to deal. We didn't ask enough questions. We wanted to believe it was just a house." Mark stood and began pacing. "So, what now? We go public? Post about it? Call the news?" Rachel shook her head. "Not yet. If we go public, we expose ourselves to whoever's behind this. I want to know more first. If it's a system, someone is keeping it running. And if someone's behind that, someone with access to our devices, our lives, then they're close." Mark stopped. "You think it's someone in town?" Rachel looked him dead in the eyes. "I think it's someone who smiles when they see us." Rachel was done waiting. After everything. The letters, the wiped phone, the stolen journal, the printouts. There was only one way forward now. Truth. And to find it, she would need proof. Mark hesitated when she first mentioned the hidden cameras. We already have cameras, he reminded her. They're not hidden. Whoever this is knows about them. That's why they never show up on them. So Rachel ordered new ones. Smaller, harder to detect, some the size of a quarter. They installed them in secret, behind air vents, inside bookshelves, inside a hollowed-out outlet cover in the hallway, one in the nursery window, and most importantly, one in the corner of the cellar. The cellar had always made Rachel uneasy. Something about the air down there, it felt heavier, like it hadn't been touched by sunlight in decades. But now they had a camera pointed right at the base of the old stairs and another angled at the back wall, where the tools hung like trophies. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. The footage was mundane: empty hallways, sleeping cats on the stairs, the occasional spider crawling across a lens. Rachel reviewed everything at night, hunched in front of her laptop, headphones tight on her ears. But then, on the 15th night, she saw it. At exactly 2:43 a.m., the camera in the basement flickered once. Then, the top of the cellar door creaked open. A figure stepped into view. A woman. She moved slowly, calmly, like she belonged there. No struggle, no tension in her limbs. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a key, and used it to open the locked storage closet near the back of the room. She didn't even use a flashlight. Just walked into the dark, like she knew every step. The footage was grainy, the face obscured by shadows, but the posture, that lean, the way she brushed hair behind her ear, it stirred something in Rachel. I know that movement. I've seen it before. She called Mark down. They sat in silence, watching the clip again and again. I feel like I've seen her, Rachel whispered. She could be anyone, Mark said. It's too dark. Rachel bit her lip. No, it's not just anyone. It's someone we've met. Before they could process it further, the laptop screen blinked. A quick flash of static, then the file folder closed by itself. Rachel reached for the mouse. That wasn't me. The footage folder was gone. Gone. Mark pulled the drive. It was still warm, still blinking, but when they checked on another laptop it was blank. Not corrupted, not moved, erased. That night they barely slept. Mark couldn't stop pacing. Rachel sat with her back to the wall, eyes wide, trying to remember where she'd seen that posture before, who'd moved like that. They didn't leave the house for 2 days. Then, on the 3rd night, Mark decided to go down to the basement again. Rachel begged him not to. What if she's down there? She won't be. We've been checking every night. We need to know what's in that storage closet. He took a flashlight and his old baseball bat. Rachel watched the camera feed on her laptop. Mark disappeared into the grainy darkness. The camera blinked once, then twice. Then nothing. The feed went black. Rachel screamed and ran down the stairs. She found Mark lying on the cold floor of the cellar, unconscious, a bruise already forming at the back of his head. The bat lay beside him untouched. His flashlight flickered weakly against the far wall. And taped to his chest, in the same neat, slanted handwriting as all the other letters, was a small white card. Leave now, final warning. Rachel ripped it off, heart racing, and called 911 with shaking hands. Mark came to in the hospital a few hours later. No serious injury, just a concussion. But he had no memory of what happened. He remembered stepping into the cellar, aiming the light at the closet, and then nothing. I didn't hear anyone, he muttered. Didn't see anyone, just lights out. Rachel showed the note to the officer who came to take the report. He glanced at it, sighed, and scribbled into his pad. Same handwriting as the others? Yes. Still no signs of forced entry? No, Rachel said. But someone was down there. Someone hit him. The officer gave her a tired, practiced look. We'll keep the file open. Rachel stared at him. That's it? We have no suspects, and no evidence. Your own footage is gone. We'll investigate, but there's only so much we can do. Someone knew how to erase footage from a hidden system, she snapped. You think some random prankster can do that? He didn't answer. That night, Rachel sat alone in the living room while Mark slept upstairs, medicated and groggy. The house was silent except for the occasional groan of the wood. She kept glancing at the vents. They'd been here 3 months, and someone had always known what they were doing. Suddenly she stood up and grabbed a screwdriver from the drawer, moved to the hallway vent and unscrewed it, pulled the metal cover free, shoved her hand inside. At first nothing, just dust and cool metal. Then her fingers brushed something smooth, something not part of the ventilation system. She pulled it out. It was a microphone. Slim, matte black, wired with a thin cable that had long since been cut. It wasn't vintage, it wasn't from some ghost hunter in the 70s. It was modern, clean, manufactured recently. Rachel turned it over in her hand, heart hammering. Not haunted, not cursed. Wired. They'd been monitored from the start. Rachel didn't call first. She and Mark drove straight to Linda Everett's office, their tires crunching over the loose gravel of the small realty lot just off Main Street. Linda sat behind a walnut desk in her tidy office, wearing the same pearl earrings and pressed blazer Rachel remembered from their first showing. A framed painting of a lighthouse hung behind her, the kind you could find in any New England office waiting room. "Rachel, Mark, what a surprise," Linda beamed, rising from her chair. "Don't tell me the house is giving you more trouble? Drafts, maybe? Plumbing?" Rachel stepped in first, jaw tight. "We know." Linda tilted her head, the smile fixed in place. "Know what, dear?" "That the house has been used to manipulate and scare people into selling. We know about the restraining orders, the missing sale records, the break-ins, and we know you've been involved with every one of them." Mark crossed his arms behind her, his presence more quiet threat than verbal confrontation. For a moment, Linda just looked at them. The light from the window caught in her eyes, and something behind them shifted, like shutters closing. Then she chuckled. It was short, clipped, as cold as the wind outside. "You know, sometimes people just aren't meant to live in old homes," she said calmly, "especially if they let their imaginations get the best of them." Rachel's mouth tightened. "Is that what happened to the Jamesons? Or the Marshalls? Or that single mom from 2011 who vanished off the records?" Linda walked around her desk slowly, her heels clicking against the wood floor. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Real estate is a complicated business. Emotions run high. People move in, bring all their baggage, and blame the house when things fall apart." Mark stepped forward. "You're behind this." Linda met his gaze squarely. "No, I'm just very good at what I do, and I'm not the one letting fear tear apart a marriage." The words landed like a slap. Rachel blinked. "You should go," Linda added, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "Unless you're looking to list the house, which, given your situation, might be a wise choice." They left, but not before Rachel glanced back and caught Linda watching them through the window, her face unreadable. That night, Rachel didn't sleep. Instead, she dug deeper. Linda Everett's name popped up in the sale history of not just 12 Maple Lane but 5 other homes in nearby towns, each with strange patterns, quick movings, sudden listings, nervous or missing seller statements. One house in particular stood out, a property in Merrimack, sold twice in under a year, both times under duress. The second seller had filed a police report after finding letters in her daughter's backpack, letters she hadn't written. Linda had listed that house too. Rachel sat back in her chair, eyes wide. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a network, a cycle. They move you in, they scare you out, they buy it back cheap. Then they repeat. "It's a racket," Rachel said aloud, calling Mark over. "They're creating a problem and selling the solution, over and over again." Mark scanned the screen and shook his head. "And no one stopped her?" "Not yet, but they will." That's when Rachel decided to flip the game. She spent the next 2 days setting a trap. First, she printed her own cream-colored envelope, mimicking the familiar formatting of the Watcher. She filled it with vague, unsettling lines like the others. "You won't win this, I see what you're planning." Then she staged a fight with Mark, loud, dramatic, and right in the driveway, the kind of argument neighbors would hear, doors would peek open for. the kind where a couple's unraveling felt real. Rachel stormed off down the block, holding a box filled with papers and clothes. Mark slammed the front door after her. Within an hour, Rachel made the next move. She accidentally left the fake watcher letter in her mailbox, with the flap half closed. That evening, she called the realty office from a new burner number, disguising her voice just enough. "I'm the woman from 12 Maple Lane. We're thinking of selling. I'd rather keep it quiet, maybe move quickly. Can we meet?" The receptionist scheduled a meeting for the next afternoon. Linda herself would be there. Rachel smiled for the first time in weeks. As Mark monitored the house's interior cameras for any response, Rachel waited. She didn't expect to catch Linda red-handed, not yet. But she wanted to see if someone took the bait, if the pattern repeated, if the storm behind that tight realtor smile would show itself again. But that night, the real surprise came not from the mailbox or the seller. It came from a movement caught on one of the attic cameras. A shadow passed quickly across the floor, then paused, just a faint outline, distorted by low light. But it stopped beside the circle of dolls they'd left undisturbed since finding them. It knelt down, reached out. Then it turned, toward the camera, as if it had always known it was there. The screen went dark. Rachel froze in front of the monitor. They had taken the bait. It happened just after 2 a.m. Rachel had barely dozed off on the couch when her phone buzzed. A silent notification from the motion alert system tied to the attic camera. Then another, this time from the kitchen. She sat up fast, adrenaline cutting through the fog of sleep. Mark was still upstairs, recovering from his concussion, sleeping deeply under his prescribed sedatives. Rachel didn't wake him. She slipped the phone into her hoodie pocket, heart pounding, and tapped into the live feed from the hidden cameras. At first the kitchen appeared empty, dim, still. Then a figure emerged from the shadows. A woman, dressed entirely in black, gloves on, hair pulled back into a tight bun. She moved with precision, familiarity, like she knew every creaking board, every camera blind spot. Or thought she did. But Rachel had rewired the house herself. These cameras weren't the ones Linda had counted on, they were hers. The figure moved toward the kitchen counter and placed something there. A letter. Cream-colored envelope, the same twisted calling card they'd received for months. Rachel's hands shook, but she pressed record. Then she dialed the police. The dispatcher on the other end answered quickly, and Rachel whispered, "The intruder is inside. 12 Maple Lane. I have them on camera. I'm going in." She didn't wait for a response. She didn't have time. Rachel grabbed the baseball bat Mark kept by the stairs. She turned on no lights as she descended, only the glow from her phone lighting the way. Her thumb hovered over the stream button on her phone's screen, ready to send the entire confrontation live to the local police's public safety line. The woman in the kitchen turned slowly when Rachel entered. It was her, Linda Everett. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Rachel stepped forward, gripping the bat tight. "You really came back?" Linda didn't flinch, didn't even look surprised. She looked at Rachel the way a teacher might look at a child who just failed a test. "I expected you to find out eventually," Linda said quietly. Rachel's mouth was dry. "You broke into my home." Linda tilted her head. "It was never your home." They stared at each other across the kitchen island, the cream envelope between them like a threat written in ink. "You've been tormenting us for months," Rachel said, "scaring people, driving them out." Linda's eyes flashed. "I never meant to hurt anyone. That's not what this is about." Rachel slowly tapped her phone's screen, starting the live stream. The red dot blinked silently. "Then what is it about?" Linda stepped back and sat at the dining table like she had every right to be there. "You ever lose everything, Rachel?" she said, folding her hands. "You ever watch a bank strip the home you raised your kids in, hear your husband cry at night because he feels like a failure?" Rachel didn't answer. Linda went on. "My family had a house like this once. Old, full of character. Too many repairs, too little time. But it was ours. Until the recession chewed us up and spit us out." She looked past Rachel, as if seeing some other version of the kitchen. "After we lost the house, I went back a year later, just to look. The new owners had gutted it, painted everything beige, Took down the swing my son used to play on, replaced the front door with some soulless metal thing. Her jaw clenched. They didn't deserve it. Rachel stared, speechless. So, what? This is revenge? No, Linda said sharply. It's justice. The system failed people like me. Now I've found a way to take back what's mine. People buy homes for clout, for Instagram, for bragging rights. They don't respect them. They don't earn them. So you harass them, gaslight them, steal their privacy, and break into their homes. Linda didn't blink. I give them what they expect. Haunted houses, old curses, all the drama they secretly crave. I plant seeds. Fear does the rest. Then I buy the homes back. Clean, quick, cheap. And I find someone who actually belongs in them. Rachel's blood ran cold. You think you're the hero in this? I think I'm the only one who sees what's really happening, Linda replied. Rachel moved subtly to the side, keeping her phone pointed at Linda, her thumb trembling slightly. She could hear the faint static of the live stream, still active. Her signal was strong. What about the others, the families before us? Linda shrugged. Most of them were soft. One man had a drinking problem. One family used to scream at each other every night. I saved them the embarrassment of imploding. You and Mark? You're better than most. I almost thought you'd stay. But that would ruin your game. Linda didn't answer. Outside, headlights cut across the street. A cruiser pulled up, tires rolling slow over wet pavement. Another followed. Blue and red lights flashed silently through the windows. Linda turned, saw the lights, and finally showed a crack in her calm. Her smile faded. Rachel held up the phone, revealing the live stream still running. I never stopped recording. Linda stood abruptly, knocking over the chair behind her. She looked around, like a cornered animal calculating whether to run, fight, or vanish. But she didn't get the chance. The door burst open. Two officers stepped in with guns drawn, flashlights beaming. Linda raised her gloved hand slowly, her face falling into something Rachel hadn't seen before. Resignation. Like this had always been the end. They cuffed her gently, not roughly. She didn't resist. Rachel stood frozen, the letter still on the counter beside her. Mark, awakened by the chaos, appeared at the top of the stairs, bleary-eyed and stunned. Rachel didn't say anything. She just reached for his hand. Linda was led out into the cold night. As she passed Rachel, she said one final thing, low enough that only she could hear. There's more like me. This won't stop with me. Then she was gone. Rachel stood in the kitchen, shaking, not from fear anymore. From relief, from rage, from the adrenaline of finally knowing the truth. But even as the cruiser pulled away and the flashing lights faded, one thought wouldn't leave her. If there were others, how many homes had been turned into traps? And how many more were still waiting? The story broke within hours. By morning, The Watcher of Willow Creek was the lead headline across local news stations and trending on social media across the state. The footage from Rachel's phone, grainy but clear, was shared by every outlet with bold text. Local realtor admits to orchestrating years of homeowner harassment. They blurred Rachel's face at her request, but Linda Everett's image was everywhere, a mugshot in black and white. An older woman, once admired, now revealed as the architect of a decade-long psychological game that had left families broken and towns reeling. The town of Willow Creek didn't take it well. Neighbors who once waved and smiled now averted their eyes when Rachel and Mark walked down the street. Not out of shame, but out of stunned disbelief. Some of them had known Linda for years. She'd helped their parents buy homes. She'd attended PTA meetings. She'd donated to the church renovation project. And now she was at the center of a police corruption investigation. It turned out Linda's web went deeper than they ever imagined. She'd cultivated friendships, quiet, low-key connections, with local officials, zoning officers, and even a deputy chief in the Willow Creek Police Department. Officers who had dismissed Rachel and Mark's initial reports were now placed under internal review. Some were suspended. One abruptly resigned. A formal statement was issued by the mayor's office, carefully worded to distance city leadership from Linda's actions, but filled with public remorse. The mayor personally called Rachel, offered apologies, promised restitution. And then came the house. The deed to 12 Maple Lane was quietly transferred. The town couldn't admit legal wrongdoing outright, but they acknowledged Rachel and Mark's ordeal in the only way they could, by gifting them full ownership of the home, mortgage-free. As part of the deal, the property would also be monitored by a third-party security firm for 6 months at no charge. Rachel stared at the new deed the morning it arrived, her name and Mark's, written in bold at the top. For the first time since they moved in, the house belonged entirely to them. No shadow letters, no tricks, no one watching. At least, not anymore. The next few weeks passed in slow motion. With Linda behind bars awaiting trial and her network of influence crumbling, the letters finally stopped. No more envelopes in the mailbox. No more whispers behind the walls. No more strange figures on camera. Just silence. But silence came with its own weight. Mark began therapy 3 days after the final letter was recovered. His night terrors hadn't stopped, and even though they knew the danger was gone, sleep still felt unsafe. He flinched at sudden noises. Sometimes, he wouldn't go into the basement alone. Rachel took a leave of absence from work. She told them it was personal, but the truth was she couldn't focus. Every time she sat down to open her laptop, she remembered the envelope full of her private emails, printed and left like bait. She spent her days differently now. One room at a time. She started with the kitchen, removed the camera equipment, painted over the scuff marks on the trim, replaced the drawer handles Linda had once touched. Then the hallway, then the guest bedroom. Each room reclaimed, not just cleaned or decorated, but purged of the invisible dread that had settled into every corner. The attic took longer. Rachel couldn't bring herself to go up there for weeks. The dolls were still there. So was the letter in the circle. Mark offered to help her throw it all away, but Rachel shook her head. "We'll do it when we're ready," she said. Eventually they were. They stood in the attic one bright Saturday afternoon. The house was quiet, just the hum of summer air outside and the creak of old wood beneath their feet. Rachel picked up each doll gently, placing them in a cardboard box, without looking too long into their plastic eyes. She read the letter one last time before burning it in the fireplace downstairs. They didn't listen either. They weren't sure who had written it, Linda or someone else before her, but it didn't matter now. The words had lost their power. Later that night, Rachel stood barefoot in the kitchen, looking out the window. The light over the sink cast soft shadows on the counter. Mark was upstairs, asleep for once, peaceful. She opened a cabinet and pulled down 2 mugs, made chamomile tea. Her hands moved slowly, purposefully, like she was rediscovering what it meant to feel safe in her own home. She took her tea to the front porch, sat on the swing and looked down the street. The neighbors were quiet. Most houses were dark, their owners already tucked away for the night. The moon hung low, casting pale light across the lawn. Rachel wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and listened, to the wind through the trees, to the creak of the swing, to the sound of nothing. No watchers. No whispers. Just quiet. But even in the quiet, she knew healing would take time. There were scars now, not visible ones, but the kind that sat beneath the surface, pulsing when you least expected. Still, she breathed in the summer air and allowed herself the smallest smile. This was her home. And she wasn't giving it up. Not to fear. Not to ghosts. Not to women in pearls who thought fear was a fair price for profit. She reached for her phone, opened a new note and typed 4 words. "They didn't break me." Then she locked the screen, leaned back and watched the moon rise over Willow Creek. The summer morning sunlight filtered through gauzy white curtains, scattering warmth across the polished floorboards of the nursery. The walls were painted a soft, hopeful yellow. A mobile hung above the crib, its fabric birds swaying slightly in the breeze from the open window. Everything in the room whispered peace, delicate and earned. Rachel stood in the doorway, her hands resting on the curve of her growing belly, and breathed in the quiet. 12 months ago, she and Mark had sat in this room surrounded by fear. Whispers behind walls, threatening letters in kitchen drawers, a town too quiet, a truth too disturbing. Now the only sound in the house was the ticking of the hallway clock and the occasional murmur of birds outside. Mark came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders and resting his chin on the top of her head. "Looks good in here," he said softly. Rachel smiled. "Feels good, too." They had painted the nursery together one weekend in March, deliberately picking the most cheerful, hopeful color they could find. They'd ordered the crib in April, assembled it in May. By June, they'd filled the room with books and toys, and Rachel began calling it her room, even though they had chosen not to find out the baby's gender. The neighbors who had once avoided their gaze now dropped off casseroles and knit baby hats. The town had shifted, as if collectively waking from a spell. There were new officers in the police department. The mayor had been re-elected, narrowly, on a promise of never again. Linda Everett's trial had made the regional news for months, drawing out the stories of every family she had terrorized. She'd pled guilty in the end, no theatrics. Just a small woman in a pressed suit, looking tired as the sentence was read aloud. 15 years. Not nearly long enough, in Rachel's opinion, but long enough to stop her from hurting anyone else. Rachel had followed the case closely at first, then less and less. Eventually, she stopped watching the coverage altogether. Life was happening again. Real life. She walked to the front of the house, stepping barefoot onto the porch, and sat down on the swing Mark had repaired in the spring. She reached for the mug of tea resting beside her and looked out over Maple Lane. The world felt more vivid now, more earned. As she rocked gently, her eyes drifted to the mailbox. It was a habit she hadn't quite broken. Every morning she checked it, not because she was expecting mail, but because she needed to know. To be sure. Rachel finished her tea and walked down the steps. The mailbox opened with a soft creak, its hinges long overdue for oiling. Most days it was just circulars and bills, occasionally a letter from her sister or one of the baby boutiques she'd ordered from. But today there was only one envelope, cream-colored, no stamp, no return address. Her stomach dropped, not in fear, but in surprise. She reached for it slowly, fingers brushing over the smooth surface. It was blank, just like the ones from before. She held her breath as she opened it, half expecting the same looping, practiced handwriting, but inside there was only a single sentence, typed in a sterile, unadorned font. "Some eyes never close." Rachel read the words twice, then turned the paper over. No signature, no date. The handwriting didn't match. In fact, there was no handwriting at all. This was different, too clean, too deliberate. She looked around the quiet street. Nothing. No figure standing at the end of the sidewalk, no black car idling across the way. Just Mrs. Abrams 2 doors down watering her petunias and a boy on a scooter zipping past toward the park. Rachel folded the paper neatly, slid it back into the envelope and carried it inside. She didn't panic. She didn't cry. She placed the envelope on the kitchen table and locked the door behind her. Then she walked back upstairs to the nursery, where morning light now flooded the room in gold. Mark was there, sitting in the rocker they'd found at an estate sale. He looked up. "Everything okay?" Rachel nodded. "Just another empty envelope." He frowned. "From her?" "No." Rachel smiled faintly. "Different. Someone else. Trying to scare me, maybe." "Are you scared?" Rachel walked to the window, watched a squirrel dart along the fence line, then turned back toward him. "No," she said, "not anymore." It was true. She had once believed fear was the worst thing a person could feel, that feeling of being watched, invaded, manipulated. But fear had taught her something else too. It had taught her how much she could endure, how far she would go to protect what she loved. She was no longer the woman who flinched at footsteps or unplugged her laptop every night in case someone was watching. She was stronger now, wiser, and ready. Later that evening, Mark grilled on the back patio while Rachel lit citronella candles and set the table for 2. The air smelled like freshly cut grass and rosemary. The baby kicked as the sun began to dip, and she rested a hand over her belly, whispering, "You're safe here." When the moon rose, Rachel sat alone for a moment on the porch swing again, listening to the cicadas hum. The envelope was still on the kitchen table. It could stay there. It didn't matter. The house was quiet, but not hollow. It was full of laughter now, light, music, dishes in the sink and warm tea mugs by the bed, baby books stacked on the coffee table. A future waiting to unfold. And yes, maybe some eyes never closed, but neither did Rachel's. She would keep watch now, for her family, for her child, and for herself. Because some homes are taken, some are broken, but others, like this one, are reclaimed piece by people who choose to stay. No matter who's watching. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel.